Hey there everyone, this is Mystic Fish and welcome to a special edition of Factorio here on the channel. I figured it would be good to try to tie up some loose ends given that the Space Age expansion is due out later this month. And one of the series that I tried to run quite a while ago was a Steampunk challenge, and the way that I was trying to go about doing it, my base kind of collapsed under its own weight. I got tired of doing it and basically gave up. It wasn't fun anymore. And it always kind of bothered me that I had never gotten it done. And so I decided I would try to take another run at it to try and get that all cleaned up before the expansion comes out. So let's get started with the ground rules here. Okay, for this run, we're making use of this mod called Wireless Challenge, which, as you can see, disconnects all wires from newly built entities, and see how far you get without wires. So this is the key thing that enables the steampunk kind of playthrough, and I will explain a little bit more about that shortly. Okay, the ground rules for the map that we are going to play on here are that we have set all of the resource passes to be very frequent, to be very large, and very rich. I figured that by the time we're done fighting for resources and expansions and going way out of the way is not sort of really what this is about. I have also turned off enemy bases, so no biters for this one. The logistical challenges of the Steampunk challenge will be enough for us. And as a result, I also turned off pollution. If we don't have biters, there's not really much point in having pollution. And so that actually saves a little bit of CPU work here as we play the game, because we don't have to compute what's going on with the pollution. So with that, let's hop in and talk a little bit more about how this playthrough works. Okay, I will admit here that I have actually built the base already. We can't see it now because I'm going to go over it a little bit by bit, and kind of tell the story of how we went about doing this here. But it was such a big challenge to make this thing that I decided to just do it offline rather than cut a bunch of different episodes. And so the base actually runs pretty slowly, which you might be able to expect, but that way we can get sort of a pretty quick video here. You can get most of the flavor of it, and we can get on with it. Okay, so what do we have here? So what does this wireless challenge do? What it means is if we connect power poles like this, that we didn't actually see it. So I'm going to put this down. I'm going to click, and it removes the wire. So basically, we cannot transmit electrical energy anywhere. So if I want to power a machine like this, it has to be next to a power pole. And in particular, in addition, it actually needs to be, oh, I don't have a steam engine on me. Okay, it actually needs to be near a steam engine. So we actually have to get steam everywhere we want to do something. What are some of the other things that I decided to restrict myself to? So I decided I would not actually use belts. As I think about steampunk sort of fiction, conveyor belts are a little too mechanical, I think, for sort of what I would expect. Maybe we could have steam-powered ones, but I decided not to go for it. And so I've actually disabled the recipes that I'm not using here. So no splitters, no undergrounds, and we only have the belts here because we need them for green science. The other restriction primarily is that we're going to stick to burner inserters only. This is the only type of inserter that we're going to allow ourselves. And we are going to also limit ourselves mining-wise to burner miners. So we are going to stick to that stuff. As far as what the base is built out of, we don't use regular inserters either. Those are just used for green science, so these are sort of an inert object, so to speak. As I said, we allow trains. What do we have over here? We're only using solar panel accumulators for space science. If you can believe it, we have steampunk space science. We'll get to that, not to sort of get too far ahead of ourselves. Electric furnaces are, again, only built for making purple science. And what else? Same thing with the modules. Productivity modules only for Purple Science. Speed modules only for making RCUs and launching the rocket. So those do not go into any buildings. What else? And they only, even though we have biters turned off, I did end up doing a little bit of military research just so I could get sort of one-shot grenades. So because because there's no bots, I'm not allowing myself bots. I had to get rid of any tree I wanted to get rid of. I had to do it myself. So being able to just one-shot trees with grenades was worth sort of a little bit of military science upgrade. Okay, so we don't have splitters and belts. We don't have filter inserters. So we do need some mechanism for being able to sort some stuff just to get stuff into the places we want it to go. And so there's actually a mechanic here which we're going to take advantage of, which is that you can actually just put two rails down like this, and you can put a cargo wagon on top of it like this. And so even though it's not connected to the rest of the rails, you can get the cargo wagon on here. And so we're going to take advantage of the fact that we can filter the slots in a cargo wagon to be specific types of materials in here. And in certain cases, I actually used fish as something that doesn't actually show up in the base anywhere. And so if I want to just reserve a slot that nothing goes into, I sort of filtered it to fish like this. So this is the main mechanic that we have for sorting stuff, and I'll explain a little bit more how that works. But the other interesting thing about setting up the cargo wagon this way is that, let's see, let's pick this up. Okay, so let's turn on the grid real quick. It may be hard to see, but rails are 2x2 entities. So it's got 2x2 here and 2x2 here. And so these two rails together are 4 squares. A cargo wagon is actually, here, let's see, I want to look at it here. Okay, look at it there. That's not what I want. Okay, well here, let's plunk it down. It can be a little tricky to get the cargo wagon to stick here. You kind of have to I've had a lot of practice, so that was actually pretty good. But I kind of have to click and then sort of shimmy my mouse over the tracks until it actually sits there. And so if we hover over this, does it tell me? Okay, so it doesn't. But cargo wagons are 6 tiles wide. And so another way of thinking about it is the cargo wagon actually hangs off the edge of the rails by 1 tile on either side. Which means we can actually stick inserters under the tracks. So in particular, I can have some train coming here, and these rails are essentially right next to each other, but I can squeeze this inserter under the edge, and it can pick things off up under here and stick things in to this cargo wagon. And then similarly, I can put one here, and that can grab things from this cargo wagon and send them out this way without having to put the inserter out this side. Okay, so being able to put the inserters under the cargo wagons turns out to be pretty necessary for some of our builds. Okay, I think that's all the mechanics that we need to talk about. And so I will meet you over where we first set up, and we can talk about how the early game had to go for this. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Okay, here we are at the starting section of the map. As you can see, the spaceship is still here. And the first thing that we ended up doing that I needed to do was to really get initial resource production going. And so this really resembles the burner phase of most standard games. So the main thing that we have over here is we've got a bunch, and we rely on coal for a lot of stuff here, right? So we've got a bunch of miners for coal. And so we can actually just collect a bunch of this stuff by like grabbing it out of here. And these are all set up to feed back into one another, and so they can run for a while on their own. We then also have a set of burner miners and smelters set up for iron. Let me go grab the iron out of here so we can see those things going. I've got a lot of... let's get rid of some of this coal here. But a lot of the early game looked like me feeding this stuff. I did decide to set up I needed a bunch of steel, primarily where this is a train-based base, so we needed a lot of steel. So I decided to set up this sort of form of automated steel production, which I haven't seen a lot of. I mean, it's not that hard to build, but we're able to do this and get some steel production going. We've got just a few things mining stone over here that was useful. We've got the copper down here as well. So what do I have here? I guess I should pull this stuff and get rid of some of this coal. Okay, so then what we have is I needed to set up sort of some kind of initial mall. So I needed to get the building materials, and I did not want to handcraft everything. One of the reasons that I ended up having to abandon my earlier steampunk base was that I just did not have enough of an automated mall set up, and so when I was ready to build something, like I didn't have it. I had to come back around and build it again myself. So I did have over here, I just had some warehouses to collect some of the stuff that we were picking up here. And here we can see some of the initial, let's see, where do we want to look first? I guess it doesn't really matter. Okay, this is probably one of the first little pieces of mall I set up. So let's give this guy some coal. And now we can see, so we've got the water coming in over here. And we can see the steampunk in action here. So we've got a steam engine here, and it's powering all of these assembly machines. And so you can see we've got the power poles over here. There's no wires on the power poles, so we actually had to get the steam engine, or maybe another way of thinking about it is these assembly machines have to be close to the steam engine. And then everything is burner inserters. So we also have to provide coal to everything that is producing stuff here. So what do we have here? We're missing some iron, so we can get some of that. So each of these machines ended up with sort of some inputs here, so we can just hand feed it whatever it needs to do its stuff. We have various drop points for coal as we go through this as well. Is this guy done? This is not done, but this guy is, yep, assembling, collecting pipes. And so that is, I mean, that's basically it, right? Like it's this janky little mall set up here. Obviously we need a lot of burner inserters. So in many cases, I would produce the intermediates right next to where they were used. So for example, I could just drop some stone in here to make here, let's grab this. So I could drop some stone in here. That would make the furnaces, which I initially needed to use. And then those furnaces also come over here to make boilers and so on. So we had some initial stuff for pipes and boilers and stuff. Let's get some more power going over here. Here we've got steam engines and boxes. We had a spot here for making grenades. A little build here for green circuits, as you can see, as well as automating power poles. So do I have some wood? I do have some wood. Okay, so we could make the power poles here that we needed. Up here, what do we have? We've got assembly machines. This is sort of we had to chain stuff here. And one of the downsides is that we occasionally, sometimes the burner inserters run out of coal. It hasn't happened that much, but every once in a while I have to go and sort of drop one in to get a sort of a little build unstuck. What else do we have down here? Down here we had some, this is for train signals. So as I mentioned, train base, so we definitely need signals for that. We'll come and talk about that in a minute. But we got burner miners, we definitely needed those. We've got stations up here. Because we, again, needing to make trains. We've got the one place making sticks just for stations. And then we also have production of steel boxes, cargo wagons, and locomotives. So this was sort of an interesting, I had to sort of span 2 builds of steam engines just to get all of the various bits of the locomotives together so that I could actually get pipes into the engines and feed them in sort of this side. So that was interesting. And then finally, I had sort of initial science built here, as well as building rails. So again, with a train base, I need a lot of rails. So I set myself up so that I could hand feed some ingredients in here, and then it would build rails while I was off and working. Initially, we just had simple gears into red science into a lab. But then we also set up the other side for green science. So we had a way to build belts and put them in, and to build inserters and put them in, and then chain the green science down here. So I just did one lab to do the basic red and green science that I needed to get really just to trains. That was the main thing that I had to get to. So I spent a lot of time doing all this, and then of course, this mall is nice in that it would build stuff while I was away, right? It was nice to go farm my resources, collect some of this stuff, drop all the resources into the inputs, and then go off and start to build some of the base. And then by the time I would come back, I'd have new materials. And so I didn't really have to spend time waiting for materials, although it was a pain to hand feed this. So one of my first jobs, I guess, was to actually automate a mall so that this could actually, I didn't have to hand feed this stuff anymore, and that I could actually mine it and have all this stuff produced on its own without my intervention. That was the main, I think I had something like this for my first run at the Steampunk, but I did not have this fully automated, and so that was one of the downfalls that I had. The other downfall that I had was that in that first run was that I decided to try to build the base with a hexagonal layout, which I will say is pretty cool, but is also really space inefficient because it was hard to pack stuff into corners of a hexagonal layout. And it was really just really too big. And so that ended up just taking up too much space, and that also made it sort of take longer to go and build. And so the other thing that I adjusted for this round was I decided to borrow the herringbone layout that I used. If some of you may have seen my cellular megabase, and that used a herringbone pattern of sort of some vertical bricks and some horizontal bricks. And so I basically just borrowed those blueprints here, and so I could, if I wanted to, stamp out the next set of rails that I needed. And so the nice thing about this is that because they're rectangular, they're properly signaled, I could actually cram a bunch of stuff. And now we can hear from the map view, we begin to get sort of a picture of some of the base. I guess as long as we're doing that, I'll give you an idea of how big it ended up being. So a fair amount of stuff going on here, but we'll get into it all in good time. All right, so first things first, the main power source that we basically have here is coal. So one of the first things we had to do is figure out how to mine coal. So let's go take a look at that. Okay, let's talk coal. So the first version of coal mining that I ended up building was actually borrowed from what we had worked out in the first run at doing the Steampunk challenge here. And basically what this looks like is 3 pairs of coal miners feeding into each other with a chain of burner inserters coming out of them. And basically what we worked out was the math works out so that these collectively produce enough coal that we can keep this burner inserter busy outputting coal or collecting it into a box without draining all of the coal here and stopping up what we had here, the miners. I originally arranged this so that because, again, due to limitations of the coal patch and the way the herringbone was being laid out, I set things up such that, as you can see, this arrangement will fill, and I used 1/8 trains. I suppose it's worth mentioning at this point. So you can see that this would refuel the locomotive, and then it would fill the first 4 cargo wagons of a 1/8 train. And then once it was full there, it would then pull around and do the last 4 cargo wagons. So this was sort of a 2-stop station. So it would come in here first, wait till it was inactive, then come here. And then that's a full set of coal. Now, I later actually updated this, and so to get a better throughput. So this essentially what you can look at is, well, here I'll show you in a minute. Okay, this later became my later mining design, and just to go over how this works, this is 7 burner miners arranged so that they stick things into this cargo wagon here to be fed onto the train here. So this is a little better in that we can see that coal goes in here and then comes out to actually feed the miners. We also can, it turns out you can pull coal out of a burner miner, so that's used to feed this one over here. This one is fed straight from here. And then this one, we have a box to collect some coal here, and then it comes back around, also feeds this one, and then also feeds this one. And so these 7 can all be operating at the same time and filling this. And we get 2 burner inserters of output as a result. So it turns out these 7 are enough to sort of keep it working if we set it up this way. So as opposed to the other example where in order to get the 2 burner inserters of output, we were actually using 12 burner miners in order to keep that going in the other configuration. So this is a little more, I don't know, burner miner efficient. I also later moved to bigger resource patches where I could just sort of do everything in one stop. So that was what coal mining looked like. Now, the other thing is because so many trains needed to load coal, actually this is not, I'm going to show you, I set up a special coal depot where we could have a train like this that was collecting coal from where it was being mined and then drop it off at a central location where it could be loaded more efficiently. And so let me walk you through the evolution of that. Okay, this was the first version of the coal depot, which again I had when I had a 2-stop coal train. And I wanted there to be sort of a place that if a train needed to pick up coal, they could do it in one stop. So this was before I had the single-stop coal mining designed. And I initially did it this way. So if you remember, we set this up with the cargo wagons in the middle here, and we have the burner miners under the ends here. And so this can unload from a coal train and then also load a train at the same time as well. And these are also set up to have some extra output inserters on the two sides so that you could sort of have two burner miners worth of loading. The one downside of this is that basically each input train only had one burner miner unloading, even though there were two per car for the ones that are coming in to pick it up. So this eventually became a bottleneck, and I decided to have an alternative version of this where we'll talk smelting in a minute here, as well as assembly of stuff. So don't look at that too much because I don't want to sort of ruin anything. But let's talk coal depot. So this is actually very similar in design to what I had done in the first Steampunk challenge, which is just setting up these vertical cargo wagons here. And now by doing this, I can unload each cargo wagon with 6 burner inserters and then also load with 6 burner inserters. There's a little extra over here for refueling locomotives. And then just due to the way the track alignment works, for example, these 3 cargo wagons exactly line up sideways with this cargo wagon. But we've got 4 over here for this one. And so what we basically do is the ones on the end only get half full. And that sort of keeps things nicely balanced. And so the nice thing is that when a train needs to come and get coal, it can come in here and very quickly pick up a bunch of coal. And in fact, as a result, if we take a look, this is not actually the right one, this one. The places where you can go get coal, there's actually only six of these. Actually, let's take a look here at all the different stations. Yes, lots of stations. These, you can see that actually I had 2 of those sort of like lower throughput coal depots. Those have been set so that their train limits are 0. So I'm not even using these anymore. And so 4 coal depots is actually enough for the entire base, which I think is actually pretty cool. Okay, let's go talk mining next. Okay, here was my first version of mining, and I'm no longer using these anymore, and so that is why we have them this way, while there's no trains here. I guess these are fine, whatever. But basically what this looks like is we have a steel box for each pickup location, and we're basically mining directly into the box, and we're using, if you take a look, this cargo wagon is filtered so it just has coal. So for this station, it's bringing a train full of coal, and that will feed the miners as well as the output inserters. So this is where we begin to see that, we have to be able to feed the output inserters and get coal into them as well. So that's what these inserters here are for. And so these stations only ended up being able to get 1 burner miner per cargo wagon, which ended up kind of being slow. I would have had to, and I did go for bigger patches where I could get an entire, full train in here without multiple stops, which ended up being nice. I ended up designing a better version of this, so let me go show that to you. Okay, this ended up being a little better. So now we've got 4 burner miners per cargo wagon to pick up, and so this is obviously 4 times faster. It does take up a little more space, but space was not really an issue here. And what was really the bottleneck was like how long it took me to make these sorts of stations. Now, and so basically we have some filters here for the coal, as well as for the copper ore, so that we only put as much coal in here as it can hold. The only sources for coal are these 2 inserters here. And actually, if you look carefully, you can see that this inserter here is actually holding a piece of coal. So one of the issues that you run into with multiple inserters putting things in is that they can sometimes not pick something up from their source that they don't have space to drop off. So you have to be very careful about making sure that the inserters don't get stuck. Like these here have copper ore sort of in their hands, waiting for a train to come through here. So that's okay. And they are able to, because they have access to the coal in here, they're able to feed coal to themselves. So that's actually okay. Now, what is going on under here? So I actually have, under the end of this cargo wagon, I actually have two burner inserters facing out into these two burner miners. So this one here is straightforward. So this one's actually picking up from the cargo wagon, basically this tile, and sticking and targeting this burner miner. So this is keeping this filled with coal. Now, here is a trickier deal. This burner inserter is also grabbing coal here to put it into this one. But this miner, its output is actually, there's two things occupying this tile. This is both the burner inserter that's supposed to keep it full of coal, which that one works fine, but it is also the corner of this cargo wagon. And so the tricky thing is that we want to make sure that when this thing is spitting copper ore out, it is putting it into the cargo wagon and not into the burner inserter. If it's trying to put it into the burner inserter, it basically gets stuck because you can't put copper ore into a burner inserter. And so for this one, it turns out you have to build this in the right order. So you have to put the cargo wagon down first, not put this inserter here, leave that one out, put the burner miner down, hand feed it some coal, just stick some coal in like this, wait until it generates some copper ore, sticks it into the cargo wagon. At that point, and I'm just guessing that this is the way this is implemented by the devs. At that point, we just sort of remember that this cargo wagon is the destination of this burner miner, or the game remembers it, and then I can put the burner inserter down, and the miner will continue putting copper ore into the cargo wagon. So that was kind of fun to figure out. It turns out that I was really overthinking this, because it works just as well if you just do this, because I can steal coal out of this thing and feed it in here, and then that's not an issue. But so I don't know. I figured all that mechanic out for sort of nothing. I did actually run some of these long enough that they actually mined out the ore under them, even with the extra rich ore amount. So I did actually take advantage of this type of thing to sort of rearrange existing ore patches when I went. Okay, so that is mining. So next thing to talk about is smelting. So I will meet you over at our first version of smelting. Okay, this was my first smelting station. So one of the changes that I made in my strategy here was that for any given item that I was going to produce, I changed it up from the way that I did this before. So my first attempt at the Steampunk, what I did was I had trains collect all of their ingredients and then pull up to a station where the ingredients got loaded in, but then the products also got put into the same train. So the train needed space for inputs and outputs, and then the train would go drop its outputs off at a depot station, similar to what we had with the coal stations. One of the problems with that is that we ended up with a ton of trains and a ton of depot stations, and they were getting stuck all the time. And so that was just a drag. That was one of the reasons we had so many stations last time, and it just got really too unwieldy. So instead, I decided to change things so that Each of the stations is kind of has two sides. There's sort of an input side and an output side. So this way, the train could pull up, and so what it would do, the train would go and collect coal and iron ore, and then pull up over here. This cargo wagon is filtered to coal, so it would just unload the coal here. And then we have burner inserters to insert directly into furnaces. These were initially stone furnaces, but of course, once I researched steel furnaces, we upgraded them. And then what we have is we have this array of inserters over burner inserters here in order to power the output inserters. So we had the furnace output into a box, and then onto a train that was coming to pick up iron plates in this case. And so these inserters here are really just to keep these two inserters fed. And so this is nice because it would allow us to buffer up a certain amount of outputs. Ended up, though, it only meant that we had one furnace per input cargo wagon. So this was also something that I figured out a better design for. So let's go take a look at the better design. Okay, so this ended up being my better design here. So now for each input cargo wagon, which would be on this side, we actually have two furnaces. So this doubled the smelting capacity of each station, which was nice. We actually have double buffers now with sort of two boxes per furnace. So these are able to buffer up quite a bit. And then we've got sort of these perpendicular cargo wagons that just have coal in them that are used really for powering output inserters here. And so this worked a lot better as far as being able to smelt things. Okay, and basically, as you can see, it also works pretty much the same way for steel as it did for iron plates. Okay, let's talk manufacturing. So this is now an assembly machine station. Excuse me. For making gears. And so excuse me. The basic way this works is if we look at the train schedule, and I'll talk about the parking in a minute, but it starts by picking up some coal, then it picks up iron plates, and then it comes here to manufacture gears. And so these inputs here, these are filtered in such a way so that there's a certain amount of coal and a certain amount of iron plates. Now, all right, let me get back to that in a minute. And so the schedule here is designed so it's got the limits here for coal and iron plates. We know exactly how much of these we need to pick up based on the way the cargo wagons are filtered. And then what we do is we come down here, and the idea of this schedule here is that we want to wait until there's inactivity and we have run out of something in one of the cars. And so basically, if you think about it, the total amount of coal here is 1,600 coal. There are 8 cars. So if one of the cars has run out of coal, then we must have used up at least 2,000 coal. And so basically what this says is we haven't pulled anything out in 15 seconds, and we might have used up all of the coal in one of the cars, then go back around and pick up more stuff. This ended up being necessary because of the mall, which we'll see in a minute. It wasn't always the case that things were consumed evenly across the 8 stations, and so this was a way to sort of recognize that one of the cars might have run out, and then it comes back around. Okay, so the coal here is used obviously to power the input inserters here, as well as the output from the assembly machine goes into this, which doubles for buffering outputs. So those are all the gears, as well as some coal. That coal that we put in here is used for 2 things. One, for powering the loading inserter that puts the gears onto the train. as well as powering the boiler here that is used for the steam engine, that we have the one power pole to power both of these, right? So basically we have one boiler steam engine for each pair of assembly machines. And this is the basic recipe for how most of the assembly stations ended up working. And then we just pull water in from the side. That's probably coming from the bottom. Yeah, it is. So, because there's we can see there's on the mini map, there's a big lake down here. So that's probably where I pulled the water for this from. Okay, so that's the basic recipe. That's the basic recipe for how we do all of the manufacturing. Now, let's get back here. So I have a massive spreadsheet that I use for all of the products that we need for science, and that calculates for me how many of the slots here I need to reserve for coal. So as I mentioned, this is a pretty slow base. In some cases, we are limited by how quickly we can load stuff in to the assembly machine. And so an example of that would be, I don't know, purple science, where we have to load 30 rails. So sometimes we're just waiting on getting inputs in. Sometimes, especially for some of the slower recipes like engines, sometimes we're limited by how fast the machine is. And in other cases, we're limited by how fast we can pull things out of the machines into the buffers, which is, I think, the case for copper cables, is actually output limited. So there's sort of like different speeds that are going here. And we need enough coal so that we can load all of the inputs, unload the outputs, provide enough power for the stations that are in here to run while they're manufacturing things. But then also, it turns out if we take a look over here on the right, it says max consumption 77.5 kilowatts, but there's a min consumption of 2.5 kilowatts. So these guys, even when they're idle, they consume a little bit of electricity. And so we actually have to have enough coal in here for the periods when they're idle as well. So there's, like I said, there's a whole big spreadsheet that goes into figuring out exactly how much coal can be put in here, and then to keep the rest for input. So when we look at this train schedule, it actually spends a fair amount of time traveling around and picking up its inputs. And so we really want it to sit here and be able to manufacture stuff sort of as long as possible. So the more inputs, right, in this case, the more iron plates that we can get on here, the longer it can sit here and manufacture gears before it has to go get more inputs. And so that's just a little more efficient, gives us better throughput per train. And so if we put too much coal on, then we're sort of not using as much of this as, or we're not getting as many iron plates per round trip as we might want. And if we don't have enough coal, then we can run out of coal, and the station might actually get stuck. And so that was. I will put a link in the description to the big spreadsheet if you are really into the math of it. But that's basically most of what is in that spreadsheet. Okay, I think then we just need to highlight a few other types of manufacturing that we do, and then we can get on with it. So let me highlight just a couple other manufacturing stations. So some manufacturing recipes also have fluid inputs, like for example, blue circuits require sulfuric acid, electric engines require lubricant. And so we modified the layout slightly so that we could put the input liquids in here in between. I think I had to move this power pole as well. These are obviously assembly machine 2s. The assembly machine 2s are the only ones that have the fluid inputs for them. Although it turned out the spreadsheet was able to show me that in many cases upgrading to assembly machine 2s didn't actually help. In particular, if we were waiting on inputs or outputs, upgrading to assembly machine 2s doesn't do any good because they're not really the bottleneck in a particular recipe. So and they have a lower power draw, so that actually meant that in many cases we actually just kept things as assembly machine 1s. So those are those inputs. And so I guess the next thing I'm going to show you is the mall. Okay, the mall actually looks a lot like our production assembly machine locations, except that the recipes are different at each station, and instead of putting things into a cargo wagon to buffer the output, we just put them directly into boxes. So in this case, we've got plenty of burner inserters. That's obviously something that we need. And then to take a look, I also have a spreadsheet to calculate this, but in essence, what I did was, and these are maybe not optimized here as much as they could, but for example, we've got one cargo wagon basically per assembly machine recipe. And so I just put together a spreadsheet to keep track of the total amounts of things that were in here so that I could make the train schedule, right? So the train actually goes to all of the ingredient stops for everything that it has, and then similarly, now these numbers are not just 1/8. It sort of depends on the minimum amount. So like I think in this case, there's maybe only one train car that has stone in it. Yeah, it's this one here. So so we know that we've only run out of stone when we're actually at 0, for example. So that's why this check is 0 here. But again, this is where the origins of the uneven loading come from, because there's different things picked up at different spots. So so that works out pretty well. And in some cases, right, like here for stations, we're able to make the sticks right here. I had to move these slightly so that they could be close enough that I could get a single inserter to insert from one to the other. But then also I need to be able to feed that, I don't know, transitional inserter with coal from one of these cars. So sometimes there were rearrangements like that. The boiler one is kind of interesting in that it takes 2 intermediates. So I had to figure out how to squeeze this through and like actually get an extra set of coal up here just to do the outputs for the boilers. But otherwise, this worked out pretty well. I ended up having 5 mall trains, if you could believe it, that making different sets of stuff. And I sort of built them up as I unlocked the research for the various things that I need, and including rocket silos. So this you can see I actually made a bunch of rocket silos in here as well. So this actually was able to even make rocket silos, and here in this case, I'm direct feeding the concrete in, sort of borrowing the water that was being used for the boiler anyway. And so this was nice because once I had the smelting stations automated and the mining and the intermediates, then I was able to get this going, which is particular rails, pipes, burner inserters. I think really need sort of the first 2 here, right? Especially cargo wagons. We use a lot of those, and assembly machine 1s. So sort of I think once I had I guess I used a lot of these too because we need steam engines, offshore pumps. So I guess I really built the first 3 trains first, and once I had these all up and running, then I was in good shape because I could just come back and the stuff that I would need for the next set of stuff that I would build would be waiting for me here, and I didn't even have to like hand feed any new stuff in here before I came back. So this was the thing that really made me able to get through this whole shebang here. let's see. I guess the next thing to talk about is probably oil processing. We've got pump jacks and stuff. So let's go talk about oil processing next, since we know how manufacturing works. Okay, the first oil field with the pump jacks, pretty straightforward. This looks like most oil fields that we're used to, except that we actually have to plunk steam engines everywhere in order to power pumps and the pump jacks. The way this works is that there's a train just for the pump jacks, and it goes and gets a bunch of coal and just feeds boilers, which generate steam. I think there's this steam, there's a tank here just so that there's a little extra steam that it can run off even while it's off fetching more coal. Then I actually did several iterations of oil processing, depending on where I was in the research. So initially we did basic oil processing. This is really just, it's kind of our basic manufacturing turned on its side, I guess, or reverse. So we got a train full of coal that's really just feeding boilers. And that's to provide power for the refineries. And then the crude oil coming straight from the pump jacks, and then the petroleum gas coming out. Here we can see the plastic. This is an example of how we did some of the fluid processing. Chem plants are the same size as assembly machines, so this is pretty much the same basic layout as sort of like we saw with the blue circuits, an assembly machine 2 with a single fluid input, and we get then only 2 rather than 3 inputs per chem plant. In theory, I've got enough room for a third one here, but it doesn't really make any sense for this one to run faster than this one, so because we're going to end up waiting for this one anyway. So I just decided to balance those out. Right, and what else do we have here? We also need to go take a look at, because we have some, I guess we can come look at sulfur over here. So sulfur is interesting in that it, trees are in my way. There we go. Yes. And it was very nice to get eventually the grenades. And so here, right. That's why I wanted to come here. So sulfur has 2 fluid inputs, and so kind of had one input, in this case water, coming in from sort of across the tracks, and then feeding the other input through like this. And so that's how we got 2 fluid inputs in here. The coal is just really just used for power. That is straightforward. So, here we've got, blue science works just like all of the other ones. In this case, the assembly machines were the limiting factors, so these are assembly machine 2s. Blue science is actually kind of slow to build. Okay, what else? All right, I guess we can move on to the next set of oil refining, which is where we were working on purple science. So I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, I misspoke. It wasn't for purple science. Purple science doesn't need anything more interesting than plastic. It's actually once we get to yellow science that we get something a little more interesting, where for yellow science, we need lubricant. So we need to use advanced oil processing, which means we get multiple outputs here. And then generally the pumps are set up so that we're prioritizing pumping the heavy oil in here to make lubricant. Anything else gets cracked into light oil, and we're cracking as much of the light oil as we have to make petroleum gas. And then, let's see, while I was doing that, I also figured out that I could rearrange things so that my steam buffer could actually just come straight off of the line of boilers here, and I could pump the steam in here to keep it in there. I actually needed to power the pump, which meant that the steam for this steam engine had to come from sort of behind the pump, because if it was trying to get pulled from here, like if I was trying to use this steam over here to power this steam engine, then if this pump is not running, it could, in theory, run out. I don't know. I was worried about that, so I set things up this way to pump things through, and generally, I just did a little bit of factory planner work over here to figure out how many refineries I needed and how much cracking I needed. Okay, so then the last iteration of this, and I guess I'll just talk while I'm walking over here. And I should mention, once I switched to building this one, I actually disconnected the version that was using the basic oil processing that we saw before. So once I switched to this, I just turned off sort of the older refineries that I had, and ran everything off this. That made it easier to reason about how to handle and balance the different fluid outputs. And then this is the final iteration, once we're getting to space science and everything, where we need not only lubricant for the electric engines that we need for yellow science, but we also need light oil for rocket fuel. And so again, it's pretty straightforward here. We got our same sort of steam buffer tank out here. It turns out we can use a lot more refineries and a lot more cracking sort of as we go here. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about how this is set up so that it doesn't get stuck, even though we don't have any circuits. So that's actually one of the things. There's no circuit network usage in any of this base anywhere. I should also mention there's no radar anywhere here. So if something was broken, I had to go visit it. I just felt like the radar is a little too electronic-y, so like that doesn't fit with the steampunk aesthetic. And neither did circuit networks. So here, this relies on pump priorities. So basically, the first thing that happens is the outputs of the refineries, we want to give priority to them, because we don't, if one of these backs up, then we can't, if we need more heavy oil, but the light oil is backed up, then we can't get more heavy oil. So we need to prioritize the use of the outputs of the refineries first. And so that is done like this, which is in this case, the petroleum output of the refineries comes in here with a pump that pumps into this pipe. Then there is a separate pipe, and then the remainder, which this is the stuff that comes out of cracking, comes in second. And basically because this pump is going into this pipe, and this pipe is back here. And I think the order that you build these two pipes matters. I'll have to go check on that. Maybe I'll put a comment on exactly how that works. But basically, this is input priority for the pumps. So the outputs of the refineries get used first. And the same thing is done down here. Like, for example, when we crack the heavy oil into light oil, actually the light oil output from the refineries is used first, right? Because we've got a pump in here, and then the stuff coming out of the cracking comes in sort of on the backside, and then it comes down here. Here's an example of the output pump priority. So in this case, because we got a pump here, it will pull things off of this pipeline first. So it prioritizes sending it out here to these tanks, and then on to rocket fuel. And then only any leftovers come over here to be cracked. And so by setting up the pumps in that way, this thing runs without getting stuck, which is pretty cool. We don't see things running right now just because there's actually a backlog of stuff going on, some processing going on. So one of the things that happens is like parts of the base are idle for good periods of time, especially if I was debugging production in one area, then other parts of the base could catch up and actually fill their buffers up. Like we actually have a full, like look at all these blue circuits. We've got full buffers in many cases here. So that works out pretty well. What else is there to say here? I guess the other thing to say, oh, let's go take a visit to the labs. And I guess while we're here, I guess I can narrate this a little bit. We can talk a little bit about navigating around. So basically, I just was always navigating around by train. So that was plunk down a single locomotive and then set a temporary stop. We can tour the base a little bit more, maybe see parts of it as it goes by. But the herringbone works pretty well. It meant that we could pack a herringbone with several stations for production, and the signaling was pretty easy because the herringbone signals had already been sort of worked out for me, which we had done in a prior design. So the only other thing I want to talk about here were labs. So labs are pretty straightforward. We're basically just chucking science in here. So the science train has coal and science on it. And so the coal is used to power these input inserters. And then the science obviously goes into the labs. Interesting thing about labs do not have any passive power draw. So you can see over there on the right, has a max consumption 60 kilowatts, but there's no min consumption. So in this case, this can all be idle, and this doesn't actually burn any coal while this is sort of sitting here. Okay, then the last thing that we should talk about is space science. So let's go take a visit over to the space science, where do I want to go? I guess I can come here-ish. And so my giant spreadsheet also figured out how many trains I needed. So the factory planner wasn't quite enough, so I shot for 16 science per minute. This wasn't quite enough because the factory planner assumes that these whatever machine is producing stuff is busy all the time. And that's not the case for this train-based system, because sometimes the train is off collecting inputs. So I also had to factor into the case that the production locations are sometimes idle, and so if that sometimes meant I needed more trains than would normally correspond to. So like, the naive way of thinking about it is, okay, well, I need 10.7 active assembly machine 2s, which should be sort of, I get 8 per train, so maybe I need 2. In fact, I do need 2, but it turns out to be a little more than it would normally be because of the idle time. I also had to build depots for certain high throughput sorts of items. So in particular, in order to load, for example, rocket fuel fast enough, the one train that was consuming rocket fuel, because rocket fuel only goes into making rocket parts for the rocket silo. In order to load that fast enough, I actually needed 2 trains, and the individual train doesn't produce rocket fuel fast enough to load the sort of rocket part train fast enough. And so I had to build depots for, I think, rocket science, RCUs. What else did I build for? LDS, blue chips, I think red circuits and green circuits. I think those were the only things that I needed depots for. And so those basically look like there's a special depot. We can go take a look at one in a minute. But let's talk down here. So this is the science train. We can see it is over here waiting to collect some space science. And so basically this is they're set up so that we get about 1,000 of each science in here. And of course this is complicated by the fact that the max stacks for all of the sciences except for space science are 200, but for space science it's 2,000. So we actually are only looking for half a stack of the space science. And I ended up getting two stations. These stations are kind of like too big to get 8 of them, so I couldn't run 8 in parallel. But I figured but it turned out running 2 in parallel was enough. And so there's 4 stations here, where in this case we're loading the third and the 7th cargo wagon with space science. We can see that we've already got this one full, the 5th one. So we've already done 5 and 6, and we've already done 1 and 2. So we're doing 3. Once we get 1,000 in each of these, it'll pull forward and do the last train, and then head off to the labs. Okay, this up here this was tricky to work out. So first off, the rocket silo is big, so I actually needed to chain multiple sort of like coal cars here just to get the coal around the side and to the point where it could be in the boiler. And we use these 2 burner inserters. They might be hard to see, but there's burner inserters basically under the edge of the top wagon that are passing coal along to the bottom wagon. And then we had a similar sort of build order thing here. So this burner inserter here is putting coal into the output inserter, which is like that one. That's pulling the space science out of the rocket silo and putting it into this train car. This is where the space science gets buffered. And then we've got a second chain of we've got a burner inserter sitting under this train car to drop coal on the ground that this one is using to stick into this cargo wagon. So that's how this coal is getting in here. All right, the coal is coming in a chain like this. I should mention it is intentional that this burner inserter is not lined up with any of the trains. It turns out that that again because it's basically 7 tiles per cargo wagon, right? Because there's the 6 of the cargo wagon plus the 1 gap in between. And so these are not exactly all aligned away. That's why you can see that this one is a little further ahead than, the distance between these 2 stations, and the distance is bigger than the distance between these 2 stations. And that's to keep things sort of aligned down here. So what do we have here? Then, so these are collecting the RCUs and the rocket fuel and the LDSs, as well as satellites. And so these are being collected. They're being staged into here. And it's very important to note that there is no coal in here. And that turns out to be very important because the first version of this did put coal in here. But because I wanted to automate this, I have this auto launch with cargo in here checked, which means great. As soon as you have built all of the parts for the rocket, then you can stuff a satellite in and get some space science out. The problem was that when there was coal in here, sometimes this inserter would launch coal into orbit instead of the satellite, which is not, it turns out, that does not produce space science. So I had to set this up. I had to figure out, do this in such a way so that the only things in here are satellites and the rocket part ingredients. So that is why that is set up this way. The train schedule here is basically go pick up all the items, and then you go sort of one at a time until you've hit some inactivity in loading stuff. That's sort of a good indication that we've run out of parts here. And there's enough space in here to load enough parts so that because while the rocket is launching, it doesn't accept any more inputs, but the train can continue unloading stuff into here. Generally, there's enough space that it has enough room to unload stuff. As long as there's ingredients in here, there's enough space in here to unload stuff while the rocket is launching. I should also mention that this inserter here that's pulling items off of the train into the staging area, its stack size has been overridden to a stack limit of 1, right? So this one has a stack limit of 3, right? I allowed myself the inserter capacity upgrades. So most of my burner inserters do 3. The problem with that is that, remember I mentioned the inserters can get stuck. So if, for example, we were full of LDS, or maybe, maybe we even had, let's see, we can accommodate 40 here, right? Let's say we had 39, but the inserter picked up 3, it would drop 1 off and then be stuck waiting to drop off the other 2. And so it'd just be sitting there holding 2 LDS pieces and not unloading the rest of the stuff. So this one, the one that's pulling the items off of the train, had to be restricted to a stack size of 1. It is also the only thing that is putting stuff into this train car, this cargo wagon. And so therefore, because it only picks up 1 at a time, it never picks up something that it doesn't have space to put down. So it never gets stuck. But this is why we needed 2 rocket silos, because the throughput of one single or stack size 1 burner inserter is not enough to unload the ingredients fast enough. So we had to get 2. All right, what is going on here? We should be getting coal in here. That's interesting. Oh, that's because I didn't put those inserters in. Okay, good. And I guess you're off to go collect more ingredients. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and actually that one should be pretty fast. So let's just track that one. So the other thing that you see here is there are these free parking. So one of the things that we had in the first run at the Steampunk channel is we found that there was sometimes contention for stations. So in particular, right, we only have 4 of these like go pick up coal stations. And so it was really important for a train that had picked up whatever coal it needed. And in this case, the inactivity is because we're fueling the locomotive, right? We actually have enough coal. But once it has enough coal, it's really important that it doesn't sit here occupying the station, because we need something else wants to come in here. And so in particular, if all of the go pick up LDS stations were busy, it would end up just sitting here. And so I created these free parking spots, and in fact we'll see how this works. So this will go to a nearby free parking. In this case, because hopefully the LDS station is available, it just passes through. But there's enough free parking. There are enough free parking stations all around that there is always a place for a train to go. So by default, trains are sort of associated with production. So this one, for example, is associated with the rocket silos that are producing the space science. So they can always go there. And so in particular, once I've gotten my satellite, I don't need a free parking in here because I'm the only train, right? So once I've got my satellite, I can always go here. And that's true for sort of all of the productions. Each production station of a type, there's sort of a train that goes with it. So I can always go there. So I don't always need, and in particular, it means that I don't need a free parking after this, because it's fine if I'm just sitting here and I need to wait for the coal a coal station to free up so I can go get some coal. It's fine because like nobody else is waiting to get where I am. So the free parking is really just put after any time you're picking up from a shared station. So this should actually be pretty fast because the loading is pretty quick for these rocket part items, because they have such small stack sizes. So yeah. So we'll finish picking this up, and we should be able to go back around. You can see that in this case, the not too long of a time to sort of like go off picking up inputs, but it does click through. I mean, like, and you can see that it does take a while, right? Like so far we're only halfway through picking up inputs at this point. I wish I had gotten on this so we could go take a look at this stuff as it was going, but that's okay. The depots are not particularly interesting. They work pretty much just like the coal depots do. They have the vertical cargo wagons in them for collecting. In this case, we're picking up rocket fuel from the rocket fuel depot. That means we can have 2 rocket fuel trains feeding the depot, even though rocket fuel production itself is pretty slow. And so that way we can always pick up quickly, which is pretty nice. So that's the main reason to have the depots here, is so that we can pick things up quickly. And now we get a good view of what a lot of the train schedules end up being. Is in many cases, especially because I was building these things as I went up the tech tree, right? The next station I need to get to is actually pretty close. So in this case, we just kind of go around the block, and then we can go and pick up the RCUs. There is, you may notice there's no free parking here. That's because I'm the only train that picks up RCUs. So I can always leave rocket and fuel to come here. There are two trains that need rocket fuel. So this one that's building rocket parts, as well as the one that makes satellites. Again, that's what the free parking is. And there's just like a ton of them over here. Most of them are idle most of the time. But I did find that when I didn't have these, I would occasionally get into deadlocks. Again, because I only had 4 coal depots in particular, like it'd be like I've got 4 things parked at the coal depots, and they all are trying to go someplace where they can't go to it because the train that's sitting there wants to go to a coal depot. So like you ended up with deadlock sometimes. It's very fast to pick up satellites, right? There's only 1 satellite per car. I should mention that that input in here, I guess this train will be back here in a minute. There's only 1 slot for a satellite here. So it's a little unpredictable which train car will unload the satellite that ends up getting used. One's stocked up in here. We only have like 5 more rocket parts, so maybe we'll sit around when this guy gets here. The other thing I did was once I only had 1 of these, and then it wasn't enough, and so when I went to building 2, I kind of reset everything, so these should be pretty synchronized. Yeah, 10, 10, 8, 10, 10, 8. So, all right, good. Now we're going to finish getting all of the coal in here that we need, so that's good. And we can watch this thing count its way up. So, again, it's a little tricky. Like, in theory, I would be wanting this to put rocket fuel in, but I kind of can't convince the inserter to put any particular thing in there. And so we have to sort of wait until it unloads enough stuff that it gives us something interesting. This inserter, though, is a size 3 inserter, so we can this one will always keep up because there's sort of an even amount of all of the stuff in here. Eventually, even amounts get unloaded here, and the total amounts that we have in here are less than sort of the insertion limits in here. Like you can see, sort of low 20s. Once we get, up to, maybe just a little over 20, 22s, I think, because it's 3, then it stops putting LDSs in. And so it's just a matter of sort of waiting for these to come through here. Okay, I kind of want to just, see a rocket launch here. So I think what I'll do is I'll come back once we are, like, super close. All right, we're pretty close to a rocket launch here. We've got 99 out of 100 built. So once we get our batch of RCUs in, we should see some space science come out. I'm a little curious. This is actually the first time that I'm seeing the second rocket silo operate. So I'm hoping it operates properly. I guess we will see. All right, here comes the RCUs. So that's good stuff. We should hopefully be able to launch. Both of these should launch pretty close to one another, give or take sort of random insertion orders, but we should be pretty close here. looks like we are pretty synchronized, so that's good. Now you can see the steam engines are really going while it launches the rocket here, which is kind of interesting. We should hopefully put we put a satellite in here on both of these, so that's good. There goes the rocket, and I think once the cargo doors shut, we should end up with space science in the rocket silos. Yep, there we go. And we can see that the space science is getting pulled out of the rocket silos over here, put into the buffering cargo wagon, and then out into the waiting train car. So that is pretty good. And so what will end up happening here, right? We don't have a satellite in here anymore, but this satellite will eventually get picked up before we advance, and it will get plunked in here. So there's always a satellite in. It's a little unpredictable which satellite, again, as I mentioned, gets used, but that's how that works. So, okay, I think we have seen just about everything at this point. Although, I guess let's go take a look. I guess we can go take a look at one of the depots. That would probably be good to do. Let's see, where are some depots? I think there are some depots up here. Oh, I'm facing the wrong way. And I'm going to be stuck behind the science train if I go there. So, this one, right-hand drive. All right, let's go. We got some depots up here. So let's see what we can see going by it. Again, you know, multiple locations of various forms of manufacture. I think there's like five locations making red circuits and maybe 7 making green circuits. But here is a depot. This is cleaned up. I had some extra parts at some point, so I just set these up so that they would get sort of put back in. And so for each cargo location can unload into the center, right? This is all completely full of rocket fuel. And then we've got just a little coal on either side of it, and that coal is primarily used to fuel the output inserters here. So the nice thing is we have 2 output inserters per cargo wagon that's picking up. So the depots let us unload faster than sort of a single train can produce. And so here's the RCUs, for example. These are full, and there's a train. In fact, it's probably exactly this one, which is its whole job is to go where we are making. Go get some coal. Go to where we're making the RCUs, which is up here. So it's going to come up here until it's full of RCUs, and then it comes over here to the depot, and then it just sits here as sort of an extra buffer until enough RCUs have been picked up that it becomes empty, and then it leaves. And hopefully by that time, there's actually two stations making RCUs. The other one is hopefully full, and then can show up and fill in for it here. So, okay, then I guess the last thing to do for us is to go and visit the labs. I think before we can do that, we have to sort of wait for the space science to finish filling up the science train. So we will be back after that. All right, I figure I've hopped onto the space science train here. It is almost done unloading all of its rocket part ingredients here. And then we can ride it around. I figured if we can show you, we need to make one more trip around before we can do the final rocket launch to finish putting the science on the science train. So once we get our 15 seconds of inactivity, we should head back around and start to go pick stuff up. So first off, we're off to go get some coal. And this is kind of the interesting thing, right? With these 1.8 trains, they can hold a lot of stuff. So even though they're sort of like individually, the components are pretty slow, there's enough of them sort of working in parallel that that we get a sort of maybe more throughput than you would kind of expect. So let's go find a coal depot. We can see that we have other trains being active with stuff. We're making some sulfur over here, or at least picking some up. Here's the coal depot. You can see we can load very quickly at the coal depot. In fact, most of what we're doing here is probably just filling up the locomotive itself, which has fuel. We can see, oops, this is the right one. We can see the fuel down there climbing up to 150. That will be full of coal. And we get 15 seconds. And then we will proceed on and go get some LDS. And that'll give us a look at the LDS depot in action, although I guess, we've kind of at least seen it. But we got to go through the free parking here. Now, I guess one of the things I should mention is because I really wanted there to be no deadlocks, then for each train that might need to use a free parking station, I made a free parking station. So every train that needs a free parking will always have one that it can go to. And so that is how we can avoid train deadlocks by doing that. That's why there's so many free parking stations around, just because we've got a lot of trains, right? If we look at trains, 135 different trains in this base doing various things. So not all of them need free parking. Like, for example, the mining trains don't need them because they only go back and forth between the coal depot and the mining station. And so there's always a spot for them at the mining station. And so they can just wait there till the coal depot is free. Then they can go to the coal depot, get their coal, and then they always have a place to go. So those trains never need free parking. Okay, we can see this in action. Basically, we're just loading off of the depot, replenishing from this train. When this train runs out of stuff, it will leave to go get some more, and the other LDS train, or the other LDS depot train, should arrive to take its place. And so that is how we keep the throughput going. Okay, I guess we've sort of seen everything in action, or most of what we've seen in action. I guess we can wait until we get to, we can pick up the satellites, see if anything's there. But here we can see, the rail signals in action. So this is actually the LDS depot train, right? We make LDS here. We filled that one up, and it's off to go drop its stuff off at the LDS depot. Here's solid fuel production coming in. We are backed up a little bit. Let's take a look at the map. Nope, we're just waiting for things to clear through. All right, so that one's got to pull in. And then we should be clear to go. So I guess there's still a potential for deadlock. It is possible that we end up with enough trains all trying to go sort of around the block in the same herringbone segment that we could deadlock, but I haven't seen that happen. So we'll have to watch for that. All right, free parking. Guess we wait for that guy to go by. We've done all of the braking speed upgrades for the trains, so we do get kind of maximum speeds for the trains once they get up to the speed that they're going at. So even though they're a little slow to get going, both with the coal power and a single locomotive, nonetheless, they can sort of get up to a reasonable top speed. What are we picking up now? Oh yeah, rocket fuel. So we're going to the rocket fuel depot right here. Again, doesn't take very long to fill out. So we've got each train car has 2 inserters, so we've got basically 16 inserters going. They're grabbing 3 things per swing, so it really does not take long to fill up the train here. As you can see, like we're advancing by pretty quick chunks here as we go. So again, we're on the only train that goes to RCUs, so we don't need to go through free parking for this one, so that's a nice little optimization. We can just go around the block, get on, and similar things happen with the satellite train. Satellites are the only ones that use the solar panels, accumulators, and radars. Get our RCUs, then we'll go get our satellites. I did find that it was important to keep the coal and the RCUs separate so that these inserters never try to grab coal because there's no coal for them to grab. And so they're only ever grabbing RCUs, which means they don't ever get stuck. And same thing happens down here. These only ever grab RCUs, the middle ones, and the ones on the outside only ever grab coal. So that's a key thing, is making sure, being very careful about places where there are multiple things for an inserter to pick up, and just making sure that we can always put them back down again. Generally, it's not an issue for most manufacturing inputs. Here's the satellite train. You can see they got to load a lot of stuff in here. I guess this was the place that we grabbed the satellite. And we're on our way back to the, we can see the copper cables going over there. So as we start to make our way through, we've got some green circuits working over there. We've got a train with some plastic on it. That's probably for red circuits, if I had to guess, although I suppose it could be for LDS. But as we start to chew through some of these buffers, we'll find more and more of the trains are going to become active, and especially once we finish loading the space science on here, and we then start getting the other sciences, then really most of the base will start to be active at that point. So, all right. That was a nice little round trip that gave us give you a little flavor, I guess, while we can watch the trains of what's going on with them. So stay tuned, and we'll get the last bit of space science in here. Okay, I hopped on the science train, and we are around to the labs here, and beginning to chew our way through the science that's on here. I believe if I consult my my spreadsheet here, the actual round trip time for the science, I think the last time I looked, I think the round trip time for the science train is something like 10 hours. It's like by the time it finishes loading all the sciences up and chewing through it all. Here, let me see if I can find this. Here it is. The round trip time for the science train is 26,000 seconds. 26. Where'd it go? And round trip time 26,363 divided by 3,600 seconds per hour is, okay, 7 hours round trip time. So I think we will have to wait 7 hours. I did a lot of just letting the base run in the background and overnight while I was building it, but I think at that point we'll be able to see the whole base in action at that point. We can see what our average science per minute is at that point. So stay tuned for more in a bit. Okay, we are back, and the base has been up and running now. And now that we are bringing the research train through to all of the sciences, we have everything humming along at the base. One of the things that I ended up doing was that I noticed that in some cases, I had originally had, like, if we look at this copper up here, this copper smelting. Let's take a closer look. Thank you, autosave, for your service. What I originally had was I had a certain number of these copper smelting stations, for example, and then I had one train for each one of these. And what that meant was that a bunch of these stations were idle a bunch of the time. And so what I did was I did a calculation based on the projected round trip time of these trains. I could figure out sort of what percentage of the time each of these stations would be busy. And then because I have the free parking structure set up, I just added enough trains so that to keep all the stations busy. And so in particular, we can see for copper smelting, there are 9 stations, although some of them are sort of the old ones that are disabled. But we have 11 trains. And so in some cases, like this one here, well, actually, that's not a good one because it's actually in the process of getting more stuff. But we can see that we have, generally, we want all of these to be saying waiting at the smelting generally. So we want these all to be busy. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is, I think that's actually the correct number. Let's take a look. If we look at it from the train view in the stations, if we look at these smeltings, okay, so this is actually a better view. So this is the old version of the smelting. So I set its limit to 0 because we didn't want that. We want the higher bandwidth ones. And so we can look at all the smelting, and we can see that almost all of them have a train waiting there, actively smelting, and except for this one. And I think that is actually just because we have a few folks that are trying to gather. Like this one's almost done. What else do we have? We have this one. That's part way. I have this one. That's part way. Sometimes what I have found is that this one's almost done, but I wonder. Let's go take a look over there. Sometimes we run out of resources and the mining kind of gets stuck. And I don't really have a good solution to it. I'm just going to sort of chalk it up to this is the jankiness of sort of this Steampunk base, is that occasionally we have to go and go fix some things. So we can come over here. It's usually a pretty easy fix. Let's see. And indeed, here you can see all of the buffers. They all have copper ore in them, except for this one. And this is because let's see, can I do this? How do I want to do this? Well, I need all of these out of here. Let's see, I can do this. Let's get these out of the way. Put this back. Copy, okay. I guess we can put the coal back in. And now, let's see, where's my miners? So one of them can go here. And here's where we have to do the trick. And then one of them, oh, maybe we don't need to do the trick. I think we can do this. So that works for that one. And let's see. I guess we have to do... Do we have to do something... I wonder if can we do something like this? I don't know. Maybe this is just one we... That would be kind of interesting. I wonder if we can do this. Will this work? I don't think this will work. This will not work because there's no way to. All right, so I think I just have to. Do this, and it's going to be that way. This always grabs coal. That's the only thing that's available here, and so we can put coal in here. Does this do me any good? I don't think I have any way to put this in here in a way that it can successfully go in. Like if I could put it there, that could dump, that could, well, that doesn't share anything, so that doesn't help. All right, well, I think this is basically what we've got here. How full is this? This is close. Let's just get you on your way. Guess we can put this stuff back. And so, yeah, like occasionally we have to go and like re-jumpstart some of the mines when they run out of resources. But otherwise, things are humming along pretty well. Let's see. Let's go take a look at some of the other busier spots. But, well, that was a little... I did not expect to do that debugging, but that I guess shows the type of things that we, I have had to do. We do have a bunch of trains moving around. We do have like a fair amount of train traffic. But by adding those trains, like I talked about, it means that most stations that can produce something have a supply train waiting there. And then the other ones that, like this steel one, is ready to produce steel, and I think there's a few others, right? So these are, there are 3 steel stations, so they all have a train at them, but there's 2 additional ones that are basically, they're already full of coal and iron in this case. So as soon as one of these exhausts itself, it'll leave, it'll start picking up its coal and iron plates, and then one of the waiting ones can slide in, and then that way we get sort of not totally constant production, because it still takes time for this one to pull out and for the other one to pull in. But it keeps the production moving. And if we now take a look at the last, not 10 minutes, 10 hours, and we filter to science, we can see that we're actually hitting the 16 science per minute target that I had for this base. That's what really the designs were based on. This is the factory plan initially that sort of where I mostly needed this to compute the rates that I needed for things, and then I took these rates and input them to my spreadsheet. But this basically is doing it. So we are doing infinite research, although pretty slowly at this point. And the base is humming along. Largely, I can leave this unattended, and except for sort of restarting some of the mining that gets stuck, I did occasionally run into some train deadlocks. I did find that a train ran out of fuel because one of the coal depots, I did not have the burner inserter that refuels the locomotive, and so I actually had one run out of coal and then sit blocking the tracks, so I had to unstick that. And then this area over here, where we're producing satellites and RCUs and some of the higher level items, we did run into actually a train gridlock where it just happened that enough trains were all trying to come in and out of the same area that they gridlocked. I might have been able to, I wonder if adding sort of like one more herringbone over here would have given us a little more space to sort of get it going. But I did have to unstick that, but that was really the only time that that has happened. If we go ahead and turn off the stations, we can get a better view of how the trains are working through the base. So at any given time, I think there's well over 100 trains, but because they have so much stuff on them, it takes a long time to load them and a long time to use up what they have. So at any given time, there's only a handful of trains that are actually in motion, but they do actually have to wait for each other. And so it is nice that we have worked out previously the intersections here for the herringbones. So all the intersections here are three-way intersections, and they're all signaled in such a way that you can have two trains coming through them in two different directions, and they can both proceed without blocking each other, which is sort of really important for maintaining train throughput. But there's definitely activity. I mean, there are really no times where I've been sitting watching this view here where we've actually had no trains going at all. Like here's a spot where like this train is waiting for that one to have just pulled out, and once it clears the intersection, this one can proceed. So the train signaling is working out well for us, and that is the Steampunk challenge. So I am very happy to have finally figured out how to do that, and to have completed this challenge after quite a bit of time. It might have been like maybe a couple of years since I gave up on the first attempt, but feels good to get this one done. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and we will talk to you all soon. Take care.